In spite of the offseason losses of Stefon Diggs and Gabe Davis, Josh Allen has gone on to have his most efficient season as an NFL quarterback yet. Welcome back to State of the Association. I'm your host, Nash Roberts, and right now, the entire NFL world is watching Josh Allen. Now, to set the scene a little bit, this was a year that could have kind of been a little bit of a lull for the Buffalo Bills. This is a team that has been very good for years now, but they lost their top two wideouts in Gabe Davis and Stefon Diggs. And as a result, when you have a franchise quarterback in Josh Allen, you don't expect to go into a full rebuild, but this was expected to be a little bit of a reset for them. Dalton Kincaid had a good rookie year, but outside of that, there were question marks about guys like Khalil Shakir, if he could really develop and take a leap to be that number one wideout for the team. And Josh Allen, in the couple years prior to this, had put up amazing numbers, 40-plus total touchdowns. But the question mark about him had been his turnovers, because he's putting up a lot of points on the board, but your team is also losing out on some opportunities because sometimes the ball just gets away from him. And that was the biggest knock on Josh Allen going into the year. So it's going to be a little bit of a reset, but hey, they've got an elite franchise quarterback who is certainly not afraid to air that ball out, but expectations weren't sky high for them. But Josh Allen would lead the Bills to not just a 13-4 record, but in the regular season, they would topple both the one seeds in the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC and the Detroit Lions of the NFC. They would take down both of those teams and play spoiler a little bit, because as good as Buffalo proved to be the best, you've got to beat the best. And going into these games, people thought that the Bills might stay in it, but ultimately they went with the teams that were having super dominant years and teams that are probably going to end up being the one seed based off the way the trajectory was already going, and that ultimately that did end up to be the case. But the Bills play spoiler a little bit, because aside from when the Chiefs would rest their starters in Week 18, they hand the Kansas City Chiefs their only proper loss of the NFL season, and they give Detroit their final loss of the regular season. Both these teams didn't lose very often, but they did lose to the Buffalo Bills. And under center for them was, of course, Josh Allen. Now back to that narrative about him being a little bit of a gunslinger, a little bit too risky at times, in a way that kind of negates his amazing production. In pretty much any discussion about Josh Allen, there was absolutely the undeniable fact that he is a great quarterback. And some people would for sure have him at number one. But there were a large majority of people who thought those turnovers were just a little bit too much. So you know what he does? He goes out and he has his most efficient season yet for a Bills team that is looking to be in a little bit of a reset year. He throws 6 picks the entire season, which is the lowest mark of his career. He has the second highest passer rating of his NFL career, and he chips in 28 passing touchdowns while he's at it. It's in contrast to a guy like Justin Herbert, who, aside from that playoff game he just had, has been really, really safe with the ball all year. He only had 3 picks the entire regular season. But with that came a drop in the actual touchdowns he was getting. And he was a lot more efficient, but some people can kind of look at that as he was also asked to do quite a bit less and function more within the flow of the offense under Jim Harbaugh than he had in years past, where he threw for 5,000 yards. But for Josh Allen, he once again made up a large majority of this offense. Now, James Cook had a very good year. He ran for over 1,000 yards. Do not get me wrong, but this is a team that at the end of the day, it is led by your quarterback in Josh Allen, your franchise cornerstone in number 17. And with a depleted wide receiver core and question marks about some of his decision-making, Josh Allen goes out and has maybe his most impressive season yet in terms of how he is able to combat the narratives, the false narratives that he has proven to be false against him, and led the Bills to a great regular season. And they just had a great game against the Denver Broncos as well, where they executed on all fronts. James Cook had a great game. So did Josh Allen. He completed over 70% of his passes. This is a very, very good football team. And I made my playoff predictions a couple of days ago. The only reason I don't have them going to the Super Bowl is the simple fact that they're going to play the Baltimore Ravens. And as good as Buffalo was all the regular season, they did lose 35-10 to the Ravens. So I just kind of view that as a bad matchup and the team that maybe has the Bills' number. But any other team in the AFC, I think Buffalo has a very good chance to win. They did it against the Chiefs. They've done it against even the one seed in the NFC, in the Detroit Lions. This is a great, great football team. One of the best in the entire NFL in a year where they were kind of looked at as taking a little bit of a year off to reset, rebuild their core around Josh Allen. But he fights back against every critique that has been made of him. And not only does he have that individual success, the team success is right there with him. So now that we have gone over the great, amazing year that Josh Allen has had, what are the implications of it? He was a second-team All-Pro this year behind Lamar Jackson. And when it comes to that MVP race, at the end of the day, it's ultimately going to go to a quarterback. So Saquon isn't really in the discussion, although he is absolutely deserving of recognition. It's really between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, by far the two best quarterbacks in the league this year. And if Lamar Jackson wins, this will be his third. But for Josh Allen, this will be his first. And this is a guy who consistently has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But his turnovers and a little bit of a risky play style has deterred voters in the past. But now there might be a little bit of fatigue for Lamar Jackson. We see it in the NBA as well. Vote fatigue, especially at the highest level, like an MVP award. You look at a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo for the Milwaukee Bucks. He had back-to-back years of winning MVP. And ever since then, he's arguably been an even better version of himself. But he's really not in the conversations because he had won 2 MVPs beforehand. And Nikola Jokic, the only reason he wouldn't win it this year, maybe because of team success, but especially just on an individual level, the only reason Jokic would not win it this year is because he's already won 3. And it's the same case here with Lamar Jackson. He had an amazing year as well. Only quarterback in NFL history to throw for 4,000 passing yards and rush for 800 in the same year. And he would absolutely be deserving of that MVP award. But right behind him is a guy who's never won it before, who voters might look to for that same reason. Because if you go back to last year, you could arguably flip the narrative. You could say Josh Allen deserved that one for his overall production, even if he did have some interceptions that year. And then Lamar Jackson could get this one. You could argue that both guys were more deserving the other year. And going back to the NBA as an example of how this happens in sports, Joel Embiid was competing with Nikola Jokic for these MVPs early on. And after Jokic won 2 straight, they didn't want to give a third in a row to Jokic. So they gave it to Joel Embiid, who had a great season, no doubt. But it was kind of seen as an award that was just to give it to him because he's been so great, but perhaps overshadowed by Jokic. And then the year after that, before he got injured, Embiid was having the best year of his career and was going to properly win that MVP in the eyes of the fans. And so it can kind of be the same case here, where last year kind of would have been the proper Josh Allen MVP, and this year maybe it's Lamar who's more deserving. But regardless, to even be in MVP discussions, that's a great thing. No matter who wins, you don't want to get caught up too much in that. And it's just important to take time to appreciate a player. That's what I try to do with this podcast. Sometimes there will be negative topics, sure. Typically, I try to push positivity and just take time to appreciate and show gratitude for the great athletes that we have the pleasure of watching week in, week out. And Josh Allen is absolutely one of those guys. So to even be in MVP discussions, to be without a doubt, statistically and based off of this year, a top 2 quarterback in the league, because Mahomes is kind of seen as the unanimous number 1. However, he had a down year. So this year, 2 less quarterbacks were without a doubt Lamar and Josh Allen. You're in a league with 31 other quarterbacks, 31 other starting quarterbacks, and that doesn't count even injuries or guys getting benched. To set yourself apart as one of, if not the best in the league, that's huge. And most people aren't who play football in, say, high school, they're never going to make it to the NFL. So for you to do that and be even greater and be an MVP caliber quarterback and lead your team to great records year by year and knock down the 2 number 1 seeds, whether he is the MVP or not, and he absolutely has a case, very well deserving, whoever gets it, sometimes it's important to just take a step back and appreciate a player of the caliber of a guy such as Josh Allen. Now, what does this mean for the team success? We got into the individual context of it and just kind of the magnitude of it, of being one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the NFL, and, even being in the running for MVP, what an achievement that is. What does it mean for the team right now, the Buffalo Bills? As I stated, they are 13-4, and they've toppled both Detroit and Kansas City throughout the regular season. This is a year for Buffalo that really shows you what all that Josh Allen is capable of. Because earlier on in his career, he would make risky throws, and he didn't necessarily have the big, impressive numbers that we've kind of seen from him in recent years. He didn't really have that to make up for it. So he was a little bit more of a risky guy to build your team around. And then you go and you add in Stefon Diggs, a true number 1 wideout for Josh Allen, and then he has his most productive years yet. And there's a small subsection of people that believe that Stefon Diggs was the reason for Josh Allen's success. But with Diggs moving on, you get the opportunity to really see what all that Josh Allen is capable of by being the sole contributor and facilitator to this offense. Because when a quarterback has a number 1 wideout, in key situations, more often than not, that's who they're going to go to. And it makes sense. That's the guy who's going to be open the most, or even if he's not open, be able to make contested catches like perhaps no one else on the team. But when you lose that number 1 option and you've got to go elsewhere and make plays for yourself, whether it's finding trust in someone else and being able to deliver a perfect ball to them, or in the modern NFL, like we've seen so frequently now, going out and scrambling, getting the yards yourself on a big play. When a quarterback loses his number 1 option, especially a very talented one like Stefon Diggs, we really see the capabilities of that quarterback as an individual. Because now they don't have as much of a safety net, and they're the ones that have to really make the plays. And Josh Allen absolutely did that. He passed the test with flying colors. And he was already your franchise cornerstone quarterback, no doubt, one of the best in the league, top 5 at bare minimum going into the year. But this season, he might have solidified himself as number 1 or 2. And it creates less panic within the front office of you need a true number 1 uber talented wide receiver to really succeed. Because Josh Allen, as we have just saw, it might not hurt to have that safety net, but he does not need one because he is just that talented of a quarterback. My example would be the Chiefs a few years ago when they lost Tyreek Hill. Of course, you have Travis Kelce, who's a great pass-catching tight end, but at that wide receiver position, there wasn't a lot. That was the year before Rashee Rice, and the Chiefs go on. They win the Super Bowl, led by Patrick Mahomes having a great individual year, having to find other guys to deliver that ball to and show all that he can do more individually than in years prior. And I think that's a great comparison because they had a really good pass-catching tight end in Travis Kelce, but not a true number 1 wideout. And Buffalo Bills, they have a great pass-catching tight end, Dalton Kincaid, but not a proper number 1 wideout, at least going into the year. But in spite of that, Josh Allen puts out an amazing individual effort, perhaps MVP worthy. And now you don't have to worry about finding the perfect situation for Josh Allen if you're the front office in Buffalo, because you can see that he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, no doubt. And whether he's got a guy the caliber of Diggs or whether he doesn't, at the end of the day, he's going to lead this team to wins and be an elite quarterback regardless of the situation around him. And that's something that very few guys can say. It is only the best of the best that can elevate a situation around them and become something greater than the product of a system of having a great roster and great skill position players around them, but become the system and put a team like the Buffalo Bills on your back, and the rest is up to Josh Allen. There's only a couple quarterbacks in the league who can do that, and this year he has really proven that he is one of them. So whether he's the MVP, whether the Bills go on to win the Super Bowl, if they weren't playing Baltimore, I think they would have a very, very good chance. But that is who they're meeting in the divisional round. Regardless of all of that, this was a spectacular season from Josh Allen. And relative to expectations, especially in terms of team success, perhaps his most impressive season yet. And that's insane to say because of the amazing production he's put up in years prior. But with all the context and the circumstances around it, this could very well have been Josh Allen's best year to date. And he is the system in Buffalo. So regardless of what happens the rest of the way, sometimes it's important to just take a step back and appreciate a great player while we're watching them. And in terms of a great player, Josh Allen, number 17, is one of one. And that is all for today's episode of State of the Association. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Nash Roberts.